Friends, I wanted to share my homily for this weekend. It has what is probably the gospel I get the most questions on as one of our readings. So it is the parable of the dishonest steward, right? So just to remind you, it's the parable that Jesus tells about the steward who falls out of favor with his master. He knows his master is going to dismiss him, and so he calls in his master's debtors, and he starts reducing the debts that they owe, which of course gains him all sorts of favor and new friends among them. But he's also shorting his current employer a substantial amount of money. And it leaves us a little confused if we stop there, because we go, is Jesus approving of this sort of fraudulent, sinful behavior? Well, of course not. Instead, as we keep reading and listen to Jesus' own commentary, it's clear that what he wants is us to have the same sort of persevering zeal for things that last eternally as this wicked servant, wicked employee had in terms of saving his own hide. So in light of that, I think it's important for us to pray about, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for us individually? But also, what does this mean for us as a church? Because Jesus will later say in the Gospels, right, that he doesn't call us servants, slaves, employees. He calls us friends. And so actually that raises our responsibility to work with him in bringing about his vision, in bringing about the eternal things that are good that he desires. So I have been really interested in some of the conversation that's emerged in light of Journey in Faith. I know I talk about it a lot, but I think whenever there are big things, whether that's big things in the life of the world, big things in the life of the archdiocese, or in our own lives, it actually can cast some clearer light on smaller things we may not notice otherwise. Kind of takes us outside of ourselves to see things a little more clearly. So in this conversation that has been started on an archdiocesan level about our parishes, about mission, while the mission of Journey in Faith is to hopefully cultivate a greater spirit of evangelization, to lead to greater formation in leadership for priests and for the people of God, I've heard people say, we're missing something. We need to be talking about there being more priests. We need to be praying for more priests. And absolutely, we should always be praying for vocations. And parents, it's great for you to be encouraging your sons to think about priesthood, or to encourage your daughters to think about becoming sisters. It's good to build up the religious life of a diocese. But we want to remember that a couple of the statistics that are motivating this Journey in Faith are that we're only using 37% of our church's space when we have Mass on Sunday. And we've had a decrease in attendance by 46% over the last 20 years. More priests doesn't necessarily solve that problem. In fact, it might actually dilute things further, kind of further diminish the energy that's there. So the other part of Journey in Faith that we need to keep focusing on is, how ready are we as baptized believers for mission? Are we ready not just to be good employees, to be good servants, but to be good friends of Jesus? When I was working in campus ministry at Iowa State, a couple of the campus missionaries said that really the goal of evangelization is to introduce our friends to our best friend, Jesus. So that is something that doesn't require a collar or even a degree in theology to do. That's something that all of us should be growing in the capacity to do. And I want to be clear, in our own way. Not everybody is cut out for or called to street evangelization, going up to a perfect stranger and just talking about Jesus. But do we have the internal sense that Jesus actually would delight in us sharing him with the people he's already placed in our life? Or have we adopted the idea that that is somebody else's job? This is the really important conversation for us to be having. And we can kind of see that actually in our second reading. I love it because in the midst of it, it talks about the way that the Christian people should relate to the world. And there's a certain kind of humor even in the first part of it that says we should be praying for the emperor, for our rulers. Essentially, that they'll leave us alone so that we can do what we need to do for the gospel. And as it goes on, it says that Christians would lift up holy hands in prayer, and that we would basically be about the work that Jesus has entrusted to us as members of his body, as his friends. So as we look at the world around us, maybe not on the international level, because also just like not all of us are cut out for or called to street evangelization, probably most of us are not called to go to a foreign country to be a missionary. We're not called to evangelize on the grand scale. But instead, we are called to look at our own lives, at our families, at our friends. And how am I sharing Jesus Christ with them? And to be very clear, you've heard me say this before, it is not a real quote from St. Francis of Assisi. It appears nowhere in his writings. We have to do more than just preach the gospel at all times and, if necessary, use words. We are at a place where the people of the world need the words of the gospel. They need the word himself. They need Jesus. And how are they going to know him, know how to love him, know how to worship him, know the healing and the life that he provides unless we talk about him? This is what it means to be diligent about heavenly treasures. This is what it means to serve God and not mammon. It isn't just a conversation of, well, do I care about God or do I care about money? This is ultimately, do I see my life as being about God, or do I see him maybe as a side player and I'm focused on the drama of my own life? And as the gospel makes clear, that really isn't an option for us because we can only serve one master. And so if God isn't our master, chances are we are. And that is ultimately no way to live life. Some of the saints prior to their conversions show it's actually the key to a pretty unhappy life. But it's also what we're called away from by virtue of our baptism. So yeah, sure, as a priest, I am called to make sure that you are well provided for in your mission, to make sure that sins are forgiven, to make sure that you're nourished by Jesus' body, blood, soul, and divinity, to make sure that the scriptures are unfolded for you through good teaching, through good preaching. But you are in places that I will never be able to be. You talk to people who, at least at first, I'll never be able to talk to. And the beautiful thing is that so many of you are already doing this well. I've said before, when I look at the people who are in OCIA, who have come to the church, it's because their friends, you, have been talking about your best friend, Jesus, and how you encounter him here in the Catholic Church. You are already living as those good friends of Jesus, as those co-laborers with him for the Father's harvest. And just to put one more fine point on it, our first reading, if we needed any doubt that Jesus wasn't approving of sinful, fraudulent behavior, the first reading is a prophetic warning to those who would deprive the poor of what they need. Mother Teresa said that one of the greatest poverties is a poverty of love, so a spiritual poverty, and especially a poverty of the love of Jesus. So brothers and sisters, the riches that we have been entrusted with by Jesus as our friend is not meant to be stored up, hunkered down in a church building. The grace, the life that we receive from Jesus, our friend, is meant to be shared, not just as an optional thing for a select few, but is meant to be shared with God fiercely loving and caring for those who do not yet know him. And he is expecting us. to take those riches to them. Not on our own. He's not standing apart going, okay, so do this for me. He wants to be intimately involved. And so we need to make sure that, yes, we're nurturing ourselves, our own spiritual life, through a close, intimate relationship of prayer with him. But that it doesn't stay there. That insofar as we are able, and that's different for all of us, it is dependent on the state of our life. And so we don't want to shame ourselves going, gosh, I'm not able to go and do X, Y, or Z thing. I can only do this much. Well, good, then do that. Because we see what Jesus does when the apostles bring him just 5 loaves and 2 fish. All he needs is what we know we can do. And if we give that over to him, if we take that risk, then he blesses it. He magnifies it. For too long, I think we have operated on the idea that parishes, dioceses kind of exist for themselves, rather than existing as outposts where the life of God is poured out, where his riches are thrown open for everyone who wants to come and be a part of his household to draw from. So may we take the right lesson from Jesus' parable and learn to be industrious, zealous for taking the riches of God, making friends with those who are poor in that they haven't experienced his love, those who have not yet befriended him. May we take that lesson from the gospel, and may we also learn to rejoice in the fact more and more deeply that Jesus doesn't look at us as his servants, as his employees, but as friends. And friends in a relationship where that love can grow deeper and deeper and deeper. May the Lord pour out his Spirit upon us, stir up his Spirit in us, and make all of us who are baptized, good evangelists to bear much fruit in our parishes, in our archdiocese, for the kingdom of God. God bless you.